Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Edan Maybon of LightCycleAstrology.com. Welcome back to the channel, friends. Today we are taking a look at the Neptune square Venus aspect that forms in the sky midweek just before the lunar eclipse in Scorpio at the end of the week. So I thought that this was really important to get a little bit of an overview on this particular aspect since it seems to be happening alongside the eclipse. And this is a really powerful big eclipse. So this is part of the story, this Neptune square Venus action that is happening in the sky. So that's on the agenda today. Now, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe before you leave the video. That really helps the algorithm to grow and push the channel forward, and I really do appreciate that support. You can always go to my website, lightcycleastrology.com, if you ever want to get a hold of me personally or are interested in a consultation from me. Okay, well, let's get into the astrology. This Neptune square Venus. We'll pull up the real-time clock here and take a look at this aspect that is forming, get an understanding of the timing between this aspect, when does it perfect, and all of that. So we have let's see here, I'm on May the 2nd. So this is Tuesday. I'm recording this Tuesday night here. And we're already, you can see, here's Venus at 24, almost 25 degrees. So we're already, by the time this video is released, in the applying dimension of this square between Venus and Neptune here at the end of their signs respectively. So this is perfecting very, very quickly as the week goes on here. But if we go forward one day, by Wednesday, we're already really perfects, probably more like probably mid Thursday. So that perfects, and then look what happens right after that. Here comes the eclipse coming through the following day on Friday. So the moon at this eclipse is taking place right around, I believe it's 14 or 15 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio. So a very big eclipse. And of course, we have the eclipse being hosted by a fallen Mars in Cancer, which I actually don't have in here, but let's go ahead and put Mars back in there because he is really important right now, being that planet that is informing the eclipse and hosting it. But there's Mars in Cancer in its fall, going to be the host of this eclipse. Now, we will definitely go into the eclipse itself on Friday. That's going to be the content that I plan to release. And it's going to be a pretty big video. It might even run almost 2 hours long. That's because I really want to get into a deeper dive with this eclipse. It's a really big eclipse. But this aspect between Venus and Neptune, or Neptune and Venus, you might say here. Let me just go ahead and get out my annotation, and we will make sure that this is really, really visible for everybody. But 28 to 26. So yeah, it comes through really fast, but it happens at the end of both of these signs here. So that's pretty much when the timing is. And then by Friday, it is already beginning to separate, and it's probably only maybe about until Monday. You might still be feeling a little bit of this residual Venus-Neptune square energy come Sunday night. But I think by Monday, it probably, tapers off pretty good by that point. So it's a fast aspect. Now, of course, this isn't the most complicated aspect to talk about. A lot of people can already sort of imagine what this might be like, right? This is a square from Neptune to Venus. So right off the bat, there are some traditional kinds of, or not traditional is the wrong word. There are some, I don't know if you would say typical or standard. Let's use the word standard. There are some very standard interpretations that most people would use for this particular aspect, right? It's going to be something about deception and love, or people that lie or are cheating in love, or maybe confusion in love, not being able to see what's real and what's not real, maybe getting into that fantasy realm with somebody and imagining that, somebody is greater than they really are in real life. And after the aspect wears off, Robert Hand talked a lot about this, where he would, in his book, Planets in Transit, he talked a lot about things like this. And I don't think he's wrong. This is definitely part of the archetype of Neptune. When Neptune is in that dominant square over to Venus, you're going to definitely get some of those themes coming through, no doubt. But he talked a lot about that. So having a day where you idealize somebody or a love or a situation, and you fall in love with something that may or may not really be tangibly there. Um, but I will be honest with you, when I took some formal courses from very, very prominent astrologers that were teaching Hellenistic astrology, and we got to the the year that we talked about the outer planets, and there was a whole, history of the naming convention and the discovery, and how the outer planets were, these bodies that needed us to come up with symbolism to use in an astrological way, right? We had to sort of almost invent the symbolism for them. So there were some methods that obviously seemed like common sense, but there was a part of the explanation for how did Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto come to symbolize or represent the things or themes that they do. How did they get their archetypes? Well, in a certain way, there were definitely errors in logic, and things stuck. And you sort of could stand back and think to yourself, well, you see, the logic was sound, but there were mistakes that were made, but then the mistakes stuck, and now we still use these mistakes. So, being the kind of person that I am, who's just a little bit critical sometimes and very meticulous, that never really sat right in my croft, so to speak. I always had a little bit of a problem. And then the other thing that sometimes makes me wonder about the legitimacy of the way that people use these outer planets is in a way that is really about people narrowing the bandwidth of the symbolism down to very, very few things. Whereas the traditional planets really speak to an almost overwhelming amount of like any one archetype, right? Like Venus or Mars or Jupiter, any traditional planet archetype, there is such an array. I'll give you an example here. This is my study flashcard for Jupiter. Now, I don't know if it's going to focus in on the writing. I don't think no. Let me have to, there we go. Okay. So I don't know how many words that is. That's probably upwards of maybe 30 words or so. 30 words that I have a whole, I don't know if I've ever showed you guys this, but this is the kind of nerd I am. So I was a driver across the country, a truck driver, and I would study these flashcards like every day for years. I wanted to get to the point where I could just spit out like a machine gun keywords. And I know that some people don't think that that's a good idea to just memorize keywords, but the way my memory is, I wanted to have quickness of speed. So that's what I was doing that for. But anyway, there's 30, 40 words per card, right? But these outer planets, they get so reduced sometimes. So one of the criticisms that I have of astrologers, not that I am a great astrologer and I have any grounds to be a judge of anybody else who is practicing astrology, but from my logical sense of just how things maybe could be criticized, sometimes I feel as though astrologers narrow down the outer planets to 3 or 4 keywords, and every time there's a transit by any of these planets, it's always like, if Uranus comes along, it doesn't matter where Uranus is, what sign he's in, what aspect he's making, who he's making an aspect to. None of it matters. It's just unexpected surprise. It's it's always just maybe revolution, but it's always just change. Unexpected. It's literally like we bandwidth it down to like one keyword almost. And maybe that's the way we should do it. I don't know. who am I to say for sure? But something about it doesn't sit right with me, basically, is what I'm getting at. So I'm going on this tangent, but I'm talking about all of this because I am a person that likes to fix things. So in my mind, if I have a problem with something, well, don't complain about it or criticize it. That's kind of a waste of time sometimes. Just set out to see if you can do anything to improve it, right? So that's what I did. And lo and behold, I've been working on some of these outer planet significations for years. And sometimes I write a flashcard and I try it out and I don't like it. And most of the time I actually do just go back to what everybody else is using for these planets. All the keywords that everybody else uses seems to be the thing that we all agree on. And maybe that's what we should do with these outer planets. But about a week ago or so, I had a really big, actually, it was during the Mercury Cazimi when you're supposed to have those aha moments. I had a big epiphany as I was contemplating some of these outer planets. And the epiphany was this. Okay, let's say you have a tarot card reading, and the idea of divination with a card reading, for instance, would be to just pick a card. And you know that the way divination is working is that there's no wrong card that you could pick, right? You don't pick a card off the pile and go, oh, I wasn't really supposed to get this. The universe didn't really want me to get this card. Right? That was a mistake. It's not usually what you do. What you do is you say, this is the sign. The universe wanted, or however you understand something bigger than you. The order of nature wanted me, the divination between us and the gods wanted me to get that message, to get that card. It can't be wrong. That's the sign. That's the omen. That's the message that the gods are speaking to us, right? So in the same way, in that same line of logic, I wonder if it could work like that for the names of these newly discovered planets. So Neptune, they chose Uranus, especially. Well, I don't know about Neptune actually, but I know for Uranus, they chose Uranus because they were following the old order of the naming convention for the old Greek and Roman gods, right? Roman names, but Greek gods. And in the hierarchy of gods, Uranus comes after Saturn. That's just, so it made sense. It was like, well, this is going to be, Uranus was the great sky father that fathered all of the gods below him, and those are the inner planets. So it made sense that Uranus should be named in that sort of line of succession. I think Neptune technically is out of order, but that's not really the point. The point is this. The same way that you could look at that card that you pull from the tarot deck as being the intended message that the gods wanted you to receive. And who are we mortals to even question such a mechanic, a mechanic of the universe? I certainly wouldn't try to figure that out. That would be the same for the name. So the name of Neptune isn't wrong from this perspective. It was chosen. There was something higher at work that we decided to choose this massive planet that is orbiting around us. I mean, if you think about it, it's just mind-blowing. These planets that are moving around, the size that they are and everything. The unknown effects that they must have physically on our solar system. I mean, this is no small thing. This is a giant gas planet that is beautiful and blue. There's something very mystical, and it's very far away. There's something very mystical about that. So for that planet to, through synchronicity or divinity, however you want to arrive at the rationality of why was it chosen, the fact is that it was chosen. We did choose it. And maybe that's where you stop and say, okay, that's it. So let's just go back to the origin of the mythology of the actual mythological god. That's my point. So for Uranus, it's the sky. He was the sky father. For Neptune, Neptune was the ancient water god of, I think it was he was an Italian god of wells originally, and then from there it became wells and lakes, because the rationality was that, well, the same water level that will rise the water in the well will also rise the water in the lake. All I did is just put this into YouTube and just look up the mythology of Neptune. Everybody pretty much says the same thing. I think they're pretty much just reading off of Wikipedia for the mythology of Neptune. But anyway, Neptune is the god of wells. He's the god of originally freshwater. Originally, he didn't even have anything to do with the ocean. And then, interestingly enough, what happened is as the mythology of Neptune spread, he became a more powerful god. He started out as a very small demigod god, and then he kept having these very fortuitous introductions, or these very just fortuitous things that would happen that propelled him to greater and greater status as a god, until finally he became one of the great gods among the other gods. So his reputation grew or expanded just like water. And it's so fascinating because the water connection grew as well. It started out being the water in the well, then it went to the water in the lake, then it must be the stream flowing out of the lake, and that stream led to the ocean, and then it became the ocean. And then think about this. Now he's a god in the solar system. That's how big he is now. And he's this big, beautiful blue planet, right? Seemingly looking like the color of water. So there's something there, I think. There's something there. I think that's the archetype of Neptune. And this archetype goes in line with pretty much the standard ones that we already use, but I think it gets us at a little bit different of an angle to see the archetype. So the archetype is something like something that sort of permeates, like almost like you can imagine water first growing from the well to the lake, to it's something that just sort of permeates or expands out, sort of inundates things, maybe rises and just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That is the Neptune quality. It has that, and Neptune was a god of mist and fog and things like that. So you do have these very standard connections to confusion or deception or things that are hard to see and things like that. But so now think about this, coming at this Neptune square Venus. Now we finally get to it. Well, if Neptune is a god of water and he is in a water sign, he's in a Jupiterian water sign. I asked myself today when I was thinking about this idea, what is a Jupiter water? What could take the form of a Piscean Jupiter kind of water? So that's really interesting. Well, the things I came up with are this. In my mind, when I think of Jupiter, it's almost like that spirit of the present, spirit in what is it, in A Christmas Carol? Is it A Christmas Carol? Yeah, it's that the ghost of the present kind of guy. He's jolly, he's green. That's almost a very Jupiter kind of character for me. The big beard, sort of the wild, godly looking bearded fellow that is gregarious and generous and likes to laugh and have, he's just very boisterous. In my mind, that's kind of a Jupiterian Pisces archetype. So real quick, I guess the most obvious one is, what is a Jupiterian kind of water? For me, it would be any kind of libation, any kind of alcohol whatsoever. It's that liquid, you know, libation that gets you jolly, gets you jovial, gets you feeling generous and adventurous, and just in that real sort of extra kind of way, you know. So right off the bat, I think a Jupiter kind of water is going to be any kind of libation right there. So that's keyword number one for this particular Neptune in Pisces square to Venus, right? Okay, what's another Jupiterian kind of water? I think it's sperm, because Jupiter was said to be sperm itself. So you're thinking about maybe sperm in water or sperm in the body. So I think another interpretation that you might make from this, according to my theory on this water thing, is that we could be talking about sperm. We could also be talking about tears, because think about Pisces. Pisces are very emotional creatures at times. They're very sensitive and emotional, and that's what we love about them. You know, they have that just beautiful spirit that is strong, but also very emotional. And there's a lot of tears with Pisces a lot of times. So I think a Jupiterian water of a Piscean kind could definitely be tears. I also wonder if, this is a strange one, but I also wonder if a Jupiterian kind of water couldn't be glue. And here's why. Because Jupiter tends to be for me, at the most cosmic level, Jupiter is the power of order. It is the ability to hold something together, like a society. So we get this connection with Jupiter and laws. Well, laws are meant to sort of hold us all living together in civilized ways so that we can all, you know, live together, right? So it's kind of this cohesive kind of thing. Or it's like the power against entropy. If Mercury is the god of chaos, where things break apart and become atomized, you know, then Jupiter is the opposite of that, right? All Mercury ruled signs are opposed to Jupiter ruled signs. So Jupiter brings back the light. It builds back the light. Mercury takes apart the light. So Mercury is a god of chaos. Jupiter is a god of sort of bringing things together, holding things together. So one way you might look at Jupiter is to simply think that Jupiter likes to make things cohesive, and that is a glue. So, you know, glue is kind of liquid. Could Neptune in Pisces be something like either a glue, a kind of Elmer's glue, you know, or could it be the water that makes glue a little bit less sticky? I could see both ways. Another very, very basic interpretation for Neptune in Pisces could simply be the rains of abundance, right? The water of abundance that nourishes or rejuvenates. Because Pisces, Sagittarius, and Jupiter ruled things tend to be about things that are coming back to redemption. They're coming back to something whole. So you could think about the waters that bless coming in on the rains and water the crops. You could be thinking about anything that is almost erotic or sexual that makes life propel forward. So you could think about rains or nourishing waters, maybe water that you drink of the body that's really nourishing and life promoting or very healthy for life. That's another thing I could think of. Okay, so what does all this have to do with this Neptune square? Venus, you might be wondering, well, here is what it is. Venus in Gemini is sort of like the flirtatious person at the party who just likes to talk a lot and is sparkly and is having a good time for good time's sake. You know, it's that light and airy twinkle in her eye girl that is being playful, questioning or teasing, you know, that mercurial kind of way. So this is somebody that's attractive, that has like an effervescence, I think is the right word, you know, that is flirting probably flirting with multiple people, right? Because it's Gemini, so it's like double bodied, or at least flirting with multiple ideas at, kind of all in one pass. Venus in Gemini is going to sort of either bounce back and forth between wanting to do one thing and then thinking maybe they shouldn't, and then maybe going back to wanting it and then going back to maybe they shouldn't. So there's this back and forth that Mercury, gives character to for Venus traveling through Gemini, where there's sort of that back and forth action or that double bodied action. So you think about people flirting at parties, probably innocently so, like not intentionally wanting to hurt anybody's feelings or whatever, but you do get that kind of flirty with a lot of people, flirty back and forth kind of signature with Venus in Gemini. You also get a Venus that's very curious, right? Gemini is, as a Mercury ruled sign, is very curious, right? Mercury is a very curious god. He wants to know a lot of things, a lot of details. He wants to pick things apart and understand a lot of things. So Venus, likewise, running through Mercury's sign, is going to have a little bit of that kind of, well, I'm curious about all different things that I like. I'm curious about all different people that I'm attracted to. I'm curious about why I'm attracted to certain things or people, or, that's the playfulness of Venus and Gemini. So what happens when that kind of playfulness that is innocent, but maybe sometimes a little bit, oblivious, I guess maybe is the right word. What happens when that very innocent, youthful, effervescent kind of flirtation is going on, or socializing is going on, or talking, or gossiping, that kind of mental airy quality that Venus is engaged in? What happens when that meets with some of these Jupiterian water kinds of archetypal things? Well, one thing I could think of is this definitely seems like a situation where there are any number of things with alcohol, right? You're at a party or at a bar and you're being flirty, and the alcohol is sort of promoting that or helping that out, the liquid courage, right? But we have to remember that this is a square, and squares are of the nature of Mars, and sometimes Mars can be combative, or can be causing conflict or strife, or arguments. So this is definitely the kind of energy where you're at the bar and you're being playful, or somebody's being playful, but there's a little bit of this inebriation that turns a playful conversation aggressive. So that's number one. Number two is something like, that playful energy that meets this kind of inebriated sense of overdoing it, right? Drinking too much or something like that. Could also be about, doing, loving the wrong person for one night, falling in that trap of like the one night stand, or not intending for the flirtation to be taken further than it is, but like water, the water just keeps expanding, and before you know it, you're being flooded. That's a little bit of the characteristic as well. And maybe with the sort of the Venus involved and Neptune running through a Jupiter sign that has a connection with eroticism and things like that, and then Mars, who is also pretty rowdy sometimes, you get the sense that there could be a chance for some kind of sexual aggression or unintended sexual consequences. Maybe something like, well, I didn't mean to get pregnant, but I did, something like that. And so maybe there's like that sperm being represented as that Jupiterian water. That sperm is dominating the exchange. So it's like maybe you feel like you can get away with having casual relations, and it turns out that, surprise, surprise, that sperm was pretty dominant, and now you're pregnant, and maybe you want it and maybe you don't, but either way, it's there's that Marsy kind of cutting quality where it's like, oh, this is a situation and it's this is a little bit rough, it's kind of a challenge or a surprise that is almost like a cutting. So how does water cut, right? Well, it cuts with unwanted pregnancies or surprise pregnancies, things like that. So that's one way. Or, of course, this could be like, it could be there's kind of a flirtatious energy that is met with tears, right? Another Jupiterian Neptune word could be like tears. So there's a chance that maybe somebody could take something the wrong way and get some hurt feelings. And before you know it, it's pretty emotional and it's teary. So you get this sense. Now, remember, all this stuff is coming right before the eclipse. So it adds that dimension to the eclipse where the eclipse could be the sign of something a little bit rougher ahead. A lunar eclipse in Scorpio, that's some pretty intense emotions right there. So you get the sense that you sort of see the setup almost with this aspect, so to speak. You kind of see the setup, right? There's danger there. There's dangerous waters a little bit with that Neptune square, you could say. So that is what I have for today. I hope you guys got something good out of this. This has been kind of an experimental thing for me to revisit these outer planets, maybe looking at them through some different angles. So feel free to tell me what you think in the chat. That's always great to hear what you guys think. And on Friday, we're going to be back and definitely be taking a look in depth, very in depth, and spend some time on that eclipse that is being hosted by a fallen Mars in Cancer, the moon sign connected to families, and is running through a Mars-ruled scorpionic sign that is, of course, potentially speaking to very intense, also family-driven kinds of things. So we are going to take a look at that. Now, this eclipse that is coming up is very potent and powerful, but there are some really, really good aspects that are forming about a week after the eclipse. So this is kind of maybe we're going down into a little bit of a dark place on Friday when we talk about the eclipse, but don't worry, because those dark places, and I say this as a person that has 5 planets in Scorpio in the first house, including the sun, those dark places are very healing. And so sometimes we get, dragged kicking and screaming down into those dark places, but they can be rejuvenating. And I think that is the case for this eclipse. So we'll take a look at that on Friday, and then about a week after, we're going to have some really positive things coming through as well. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave me some comments, and you can always go to lightcycleastrology.com if you want to send me a private message or check out a reading from me. All right, take care. See you later.